This video is about installing a cable with RCA plugs in a Beogram 4000 series turntable. I will discuss shielding and grounding and how to install this cable. For more information, please visit my blog at beolover.blogspot.com or go to my website at www.beolover.com. Let's start out by discussing the standard DIN5 cable setup of the 4002 Beogram. We start here on the cartridge side where the signal is coming from. We see here the four contact pads that connect to the cartridge, and the cartridge has two moving coils, and these coils now put out a balanced signal which is fed into the circuit board with red and green and white and blue contacts for left and for right. Now this balanced signal is unbalanced by connecting one side of each of the coils together and then connect that via the DIN5 connector center pin to the ground of the amplifier. So this is the low impedance connection of the unbalanced signal, and the other two contacts of the coils, they become the high impedance side of the unbalanced signal, which is fed into the amplifier input. So these signals are fed through the circuit board inside the Beogram, and they go into the connector that connects to the DIN5 cable. And you see here that the signal is directly routed through, so there is no connection to the internal circuitry of the Beogram except to the output relay. And the output relay, of course, is also galvanically separated from the circuitry inside the Beogram. So what we see here is that the signal is from the cartridge directly fed into the amplifier without any deviation inside the Beogram. Now it's interesting to note that the standard DIN5 cable that comes with the 4002 version is a doubly shielded cable. So we have one shield, the internal shield, the inner shield, that doubles as the signal return from the amplifier. So that's the amplifier ground connection. So this is a braided cable that forms a shield on the inside of the DIN5 cable, and that shields those four signal pins. Now we have four signal pins because the internal circuit board here is set up to be replaced with a CD4 decoder preamplifier for quadraphonic reproduction, and so we have here the rear channels that are also on this cable. Now the outer shield is given by the system ground of the Beogram, which is connected to the outer shield of the DIN5. So this is the metal part that you see surrounding the pins. Now this outer shield is also connected to the screw that penetrates at the rear of the turntable. And so you see, by connecting a cable to the screw, we can connect the system ground of the Beogram to some other ground. Now the system ground is also connected to the chassis of the Beogram, which is otherwise floating, with a 47 nanofarad capacitor. This serves as a high frequency interference filter. It's interesting to compare the 4002 with the 4004 setup that came later. The biggest change was that the DIN5 cable in the 4004 has only a single shield, and this single shield is simply formed by the signal return of the cartridge. This is a standard unbalanced audio cable setup. This is sort of the textbook version of a DIN5 connection. But of course we have only one shield in this case, so this setup is most likely more prone to interference than the 4002 setup. Another change was to connect the system ground of the electronics of the Beogram to its chassis. So the chassis and the system ground are tied together, but the chassis is still floating relative to Earth because we have only a two-prong power connector, and so there is no safety ground connector. Another change in the 4004 is that they got rid of the additional grounding screw in the back, so one doesn't have a choice anymore to connect the system ground to another external ground. Let's have a look real quick how this looked in the flash at the 4002 Beogram. This here is the plug that connects to the DIN 5 cable, and so you see here the 4 signals, and this here, this braided cable that goes into this yellow jacket, that is the signal return, and the black cable, that is the system ground of the Beogram electronics. This here is the exit at the turntable, and this particular one had a not so pretty setup here. I don't know what happened, what the previous owner did, but here you see this 47 nanofarad capacitor, which is connected between this tab here that is connected to the external ground screw, and that is also connected to the internal ground cable, so this black cable that comes out of the plug. And the other side of this capacitor, that is connected to a tab that is clamped between an insulating shoulder plug here and the chassis. So this makes this connection between the system ground and the chassis with the 47 nanofarad capacitor. Now you see also here that the outer shield of the DIN 5 cable is connected to the black cable here via this tab, through this really poor soldering job. So this is the outer shield, and this here is the inner part of the cable, and this inner part of the cable comes out here, and here you see that the shield of this inner part, that becomes the signal return of the cartridge. So that surrounds the 4 unbalanced signals that we have here. This here is the cable after I removed it and took the plug off, and so you see here we have the outer shield on the DIN 5, then we have the 5 pins, and the one in the center that is connected to the signal return of the cartridge and the inner shield of the cable. The outer shield is coming out here, so this part is connected to that metal ring that is on the outer side of the DIN 5 plug, and this braided cable that is connected to that center pin. So let's have a look at the RCA cable setup. I ordered the RCA cables that I installed from Sounds Heavenly in the UK, and they make really nice cables. And so these RCA cables that I got, they are individual for each of the channels. So the left and right channel each have their own cable, which has an individual shield. So this is much superior to a standard RCA cable, because a standard RCA cable, the shield of the cable is formed by the signal return. Here in this case we have a twisted pair cable that is formed by the signal return, the white lead, and the signal, the blue lead, and this is then surrounded by an aluminum foil shield that is connected with this little pin in the back here. And so this shield is connected to the ground of the Beogram, and the signal ground of the cartridge, that is connected to that white lead that is part of that twisted pair cable. So on the other end we go out into the RCA plug, which is a really nicely gold coated plug, and here we have now the outer shield of the plug is formed by the white lead that is formed to the signal return. So this makes it conform to the standard RCA setup, where the shield is assumed to be the signal return. The aluminum foil shield around this cable, that ends here before the plug or inside the plug, but it doesn't make a connection anywhere here, and this is to avoid potential ground loops. The rest of the setup is fairly similar to the DIN 5. The system ground here is connected also to the screw in the back of the chassis, so nothing changed here. And we also still have that 47 nanofarad capacitor to the floating chassis. Now I want to show you how I implemented the RCA cable. The first step was to remove the connector from the DIN 5 cable, and one can actually take these pins out by gently pressing down these tabs and then applying some pressure to the front here. I did that with a rubber pad, and with this you can push out these pins. Here you see them removed, and after ripping them off, I then soldered them on to the RCA cable. And so here you see the two cables, and these here are the two signal returns that I, in this case here, together soldered onto this one pin. And here you also see the shield connectors as they come out of the cable. Here you see all pins attached. In this case, of course, we only have 4 now because we don't feed the rear channels through into the RCA cables. And so these here are the two signal pins. This here is the signal return, and this here is the system ground that is also connected to the shields. Here you see the pins after installation in their housing. And the plug stuck into its socket. This here shows the exit at the turntable. So here you see a new 47 nanofarad capacitor that is soldered to that tab that I cleaned up, and I made a clean solder connection to the system ground, which is fed out here into a new screw. And here now we can connect that additional ground connection. This here came with the cable from Sounds Heavenly, and I added a tab to it. And this is how the cable exits from the turntable. The diameter is a little bit smaller than the DIN 5, but there is still enough friction here that this is a pretty safe cable entry, I think. And here you see those two beautiful RCA plugs. Well, now you know how to install RCA cables into a Beogram 4000 series turntable. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.